In this episode,
This is, by the way, how Jews study the Bible. I got the Hebrew on one side, the English on the other. So these are extremely important chapters for Jews,
hmm
and they are extremely, extremely important chapters for Latter-day Saints. If you're going to take your patriarchal blessing seriously. Now, this is a huge theological problem. Why is it a theological problem? Because if the blessing of covenant, the firstborn, went to Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh, his two children, how can it be that they're gone? How can it be that they just disappeared?
hello, friends. Welcome to the Ask and Seek podcast, where a couple of Latter-day Saints are learning about the Hebrew Bible from other clergy and scholars, so from other religions. And we're excited today to be reading from the end of Genesis, Genesis 42 to 50. And Jim, do you want to tell us about our guest today?
Yeah, so today is a first for our podcast. Up to this point, we have met with uh, evangelical pastors, scholars, and today we get to meet with a rabbi, and not just any rabbi, but one who is has a bit of a history with the church and has become a friend to the church in his community up in Toronto. But yeah, so today we're talking to Rabbi Jerrod Grover. So he is the senior rabbi, and you are going to have to correct me. You are the senior rabbi and Mara Datra of Beth Tikva
That's pretty
Synagogue.
good Aramaic.
Okay.
Mara Datra is the one who makes decisions for a congregation. So,
Mm.
yeah, like almost as you say, a revelator. Like the rabbi is a revelator for his congregation. The Aramaic word for that is the Mara Datra.
Okay. So probably in our context, similar to a bishop, the decision maker for the congregation, the final say in maybe what is
You
done.
got it. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have been a part of that. Rabbi Grover's been a part of that congregation or joined it at the age of 28, right out of rabbinical school. And so he is a bilingual native of Montreal. I'm assuming that is English and French.
You got it.
And holds a degree in economics from Princeton University and received both his master's and rabbinical ordination at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, where he was also the president of the student body. So we are really excited to have you on today. And we'll get into maybe a little of how we came to know of you and why we reached out to you. But before that, if you could tell us if anything else that we missed in your bio, but tell us a little about your decision to become a rabbi, to dedicate your life to God, and what went into that, and just maybe your upbringing and your relationship with God as a child, and what just led you down this path.
Thank you very much for the great introduction. Thank you, Justin and Jim, for having me on the podcast. I'm very honored to be the first rabbi that you've had on the podcast, although I'm a bit intimidated by that, and I hope I do a good job representing the views of the Jewish community on Scripture. I think it's very hard to do that because Jews have so many opinions that contradict each other themselves on how we understand Scripture. But I will try and be loyal to the breadth and not just the depth of Jewish interpretation with you guys today.
Well, unlike
Um,
Christians, we all see everything eye to eye,
all
and
right.
there's never a disagreement on what Scripture means.
I bet you Jews were a lot smaller. We're a lot smaller of a community, but I bet you would give you a good run for our money when it comes to disagreements over the years. Um, you asked me a question just about how I became a rabbi. I don't have such a great story. The story is, like many people who I think choose ministry in their lives, we grew up being profoundly impacted by the synagogues that we belonged to and the rabbis that we had relationships with. And we realized at a certain point in our lives, like this was such a blessing to have this kind of person in my life and this kind of community in my life, this would be awesome if I could do this myself, and leave this kind of impact on the world. So you correctly pointed out that I went to school in economics because it took me a while to get to that point. You know, it is a bit of a strange job. This is unlike with a bishop. You compared me to a bishop earlier, but a bishop is a volunteer position. It's a lay position in the church. But rabbis dedicate their lives to their roles within congregations. There are different kinds of rabbis, but rabbis who serve congregations dedicate their lives, and I mean their whole lives, to the communities that they serve. And it's a paid position, so it's a little bit of a strange thing to want to do this for the rest of your life. And it took me a little while to get there, but now that I've been here for 17 years, I can say that I was pretty smart back then to have chosen this career for myself because I get an incredible amount of fulfillment, spiritual fulfillment, fulfillment in my family, by serving in this capacity. And one of the great joys I have is meeting with and building relationships and bridges with those from other faiths. Because after 17 years of being in the same synagogue, it's a bit boring. So it's good to want to spread out a little bit more and discover other people. And I also find that these sorts of conversations help me appreciate my own faith better. I find them always enriching. So I hope that this is an enriching hour with you, because I know that it will be for me.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I would say I don't find it the slightest bit weird that anyone would want to dedicate their life and become a rabbi or a pastor or whatever that may be. I regularly say, like, outside of my family and those type of things, the only two things that I really feel any sort of passion and joy towards are uh, church and sports. So, and unfortunately, I don't have a career in either of those, but
I
Well,
hear you.
I'm gonna point our listeners to a podcast interview of you that I saw with about what was it, behind the scenes with the Tabernacle Choir. Um, it went into a bunch of detail of your past interactions with the Church of Jesus Christ, but you sang with the Tabernacle Choir, is that right?
And I've got a picture of it. My camera's pointed the wrong way, but I'm looking in this direction at a big picture of me singing with the choir on the wall.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and the lyrics to High on the Mountaintop that they gave me with the choir, I've got that posted up there too. The lyrics and the music. I'm not a very good singer, but I have to tell you, like, that was the highlight of the last 5 years of my career. I listen to music in the spoken word pretty regularly. I don't know if you know music in the spoken word. Music in the spoken word is one of the great broadcasts that gets produced by the church. And every week you get an inspirational message and the most extraordinary music you've ever listened to in your life. I don't think Heaven's Choir can sound better than the choir of the Tabernacle Square. And I got invited to the 5,000th anniversary, sorry, the 5,000th episode anniversary of the broadcast of music in the spoken word by Derek Porter, who's the host of the show and has actually become a great friend.
Awesome.
And I had a wonderful week of interaction with the church. And yeah, I'm slightly obsessed with the church. I have to tell you, it's might be crossing into unhealthy areas. Like, even my wife is like, "Why are you talking about the church again?" But I'm building my church library. It's growing and growing. I got a big bookshelf now. I'm um, about two-thirds of the way through the Saints, the four-volume set.
Oh, wow.
Two-thirds of the way through. I'm a bit obsessed with church history. Jews are really fascinated by the story of church history because there's so many parallels. I'm
yeah.
talking early church history, persecution, finding Zion, religious freedom, standing for truth. These are all themes that speak profoundly to Jews today. And I just can't get enough of it. So much so that another highlight was visiting the birthplace of Joseph Smith in Sharon, Vermont. And I went there on a bit of a pilgrimage last summer with my father. I happen to have a house in Vermont, so I spent a lot of time in Vermont, and it's only an hour from the Joseph Smith birthplace. Underappreciated site in church history because I don't know many people who have gone and visited there, but it is absolutely meticulously kept and worthwhile to visit and experience. So, love the church, love music and the spoken word, loving learning more and more and more about the unique theology of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I saw how many, like you've had guests on before, and some know more, some know less about the church. I'm on the road. I'm somewhere there. I'm not ignorant. I'm learning the lingo, and what to appreciate. And I think one of the things that I'm really taking in this year is the opportunity to share insights while Come Follow Me follows the pattern of study for the Old Testament. So I've already taught in a Sunday school class, in a seminary class, been on a few podcasts, and just did a great program with the church down the street, with the ward down the street, with the bishop of the ward, who is also a great, great friend of mine. And we did a program together on Abraham just 2 weeks ago,
Amazing.
and got so much encouragement and support from local people and a broader audience who want to see more of this. So I think there's a real fascination in church history with the relationship with Judah, and I'm jumping on the opportunity to learn more and to help more because I think that we're in a world today that uh, needs a little bit more love in it, and that this is one of the ways that we can do it by sharing different viewpoints on God and on faith in an atmosphere where there is mutual respect and even a bit of sacred jealousy, like
Hmm.
some stuff that I'm jealous of that you guys have that I wish we had. And the reverse that sometimes
Absolutely.
rears its head. So let's
Well,
hope this is a good conversation.
I want to give a little caveat because sometimes our prospective guests will watch previous episodes, and we've had some guests say, "Well, I don't really know anything about Mormons, so I don't know if I'd be a good candidate." I just want people to know we don't require you to know anything at all about the church, our church. We want to learn from you. And so, Rabbi Grover, you may be an extreme example of someone who knows a ton about the church. We don't expect that. And we are excited to learn from you, from your perspective. And actually, that joint talk you did about Abraham is how I heard of you and reached out. And so we're really
It's
excited
great.
to learn from you.
So it's because I know about the church and about its theology that I said, I've got to teach this class. And you gave me a whole choice of which topics in the Old Testament I could cover. And I knew that if the tribes of Israel were going to be an option, I was going to have to jump in on this lesson. So these are extremely important chapters for Jews,
Hmm.
and they are extremely, extremely important chapters for Latter-day Saints. And if for your audience that received its patriarchal blessing, it's all rooted here.
Yeah.
So this is the podcast for you. You've got to check in this lesson, and it is totally worthwhile to study these chapters. I would say it's almost obligatory to study these chapters if you're going to take your patriarchal blessing seriously and understand what it means to be a child of Jacob. Russell M. Nelson himself says we are descendants of the people that we're going to read about in these chapters.
Well, then let's just go from there. Why is this so important? I mean, I think you even mentioned in your email back just that this is if you could pick any chapters in the Old Testament to teach members of the Church of Jesus Christ, these are the chapters. So like, yeah, why? Like why just we can spend the whole time. Just tell us
Yeah.
why do these chapters matter?
The mic is yours.
Well, there's a lot to talk about in these chapters. Um, But what we're reading about here is how the book of Genesis concludes.
Mhm.
The book, right? The book begins with Adam and Eve. It continues with Noah and then introduces the first covenant figure. For Jews, this is the first explicit covenant figure in uh, in the Bible, right? Latter-day Saints have a bit of a different view on this, but for Jews and only using the Old Testament as our authority, it's clear that God enters into a special relationship with him and his descendants that does not really exist prior to him. Okay? I'm giving you the Jewish read on this.
Please.
The story gets complicated through the years because uh, Abraham has a son named Ishmael and a son named Isaac who's almost killed on the altar. And God stays Abraham's hand. Isaac is spared. The covenant flows through him. Isaac has twins, right? And the two of them don't get along. Esau and Jacob, who are wrestling already when they're in their mother's womb, the Bible describes. Esau is the older of the two, and Rebecca sees that even though he's the older one, he isn't the right one to receive the covenantal inheritance. Now, I don't want to go get into covenantal inheritance because I'll take up an hour of your time just on that topic. That I did with Abraham. But the basics, land, big part of the covenant. Progeny, big part of covenant. And this special relationship, what later becomes the relationship called the kingdom of priests and a holy people, as it's identified at Sinai. Segula is the important word in Hebrew, another word that Russell M. Nelson uses in his talk about covenant. That flows through the younger of the two, through Jacob. One of the great lessons of Genesis is that just because you are given this covenantal inheritance, it doesn't mean you get an easy life. Abraham had a pretty awful life. We don't know that much about Isaac, but what we do know was a bit rocky. I mean, let's be honest, his father tried to kill him. And Jacob has also a miserable, miserable life. Uh, Cheated, swindled, working hard, switched, the story of the bride switched at the altar. And now we're getting to the end of his life. And what's interesting is the Torah calls this portion. So just let me back up for a second. You guys know what the Torah is, right? So the Torah
Yes.
is what Jews call the five books of Moses. We call it the Torah. Um, the way we read the Torah liturgically in our synagogues is very similar to "Come Follow Me." So
Okay.
I think actually "Come Follow Me" might have been, some people say, inspired by the way Jews study the Bible. We go through the Bible from Genesis through Deuteronomy. That's the Torah. We go through the Bible over the course of a year, that we divide it up into 54 portions, and starting in the fall and then ending 1 year later, we go through all 54 portions. Each one of those portions has a name, right? Some of them are obvious. Noah was my bar mitzvah portion. Guess who that portion was about? Um, this portion that introduces the story of Jacob and his sons is called Vayeshev, and he dwelt. That's after the verse that begins this portion that says, and Jacob dwelled in dot, dot, dot. That word dwell can also mean to rest, to sit. So I'm bringing it up now because rabbinic interpreters say by the end of his life, Jacob was exhausted. He had had a very rough time, a lot of challenges, and he just wanted to retire. and quit. And it was at that moment where all of this trouble happened in his life. God almost accusing him and saying, "You are a child of the covenant. I made a covenant with you. Covenantal inheritors don't get easy lives. There is no retirement. You want to retire? It'll happen after you're dead. While you are living, covenant bearers have challenges." And that introduces the story of Joseph, which is a story that begins with brothers who can't get along with each other, who are fighting. There's jealousy, there's arrogance, there's family feuding, and it ultimately ends up in a perceived fratricide, right? Jacob believes that Joseph, who was his favorite, was eaten by a wild beast. And he says, "I will go down till the end of my days, mourning for him." It's a crazy statement. Remember, he's got 11 other kids, but it doesn't matter. It's all worth nothing to him. He's lost his favorite, and he says, "That's it. I'm done. God, you've taken the last piece of happiness that I've had in my life. You take him away from me, and I'm done." So it's one of the lessons of covenant here is all of these covenant holders, they have a terrible, terrible life. And I think there's a deeper meaning there about, how each of us with our challenges has to look at our challenges and perceive them not only as difficulties and God forbid as punishments, but I think as opportunities to frame our lives differently and take advantage of our challenges to build our faith. Right? This is a theme that is very strong in Latter-day Saint theology, that God sends challenges our way in order to fortify us, to strengthen us, right? They are not there to punish us. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I want to kind of ask you a thought on that because it's not just, I think this is a phrase that you hear in all religions or even non-religious people will often say just the idea of, well, it happened for a reason, which can be really hard to hear. If you're a young person and your spouse dies, like, oh, well, God, like, did that happen for a reason? Like, there's reason behind that. I guess, like, how do you interpret that idea that things happen for a reason, or, how would you respond to that idea? Someone's going through a hard time. Is that a belief that things happen for a reason, or that things happen so that we can give reason to them? It's kind of, what are your thoughts on that idea, that very common phrase that we hear all the time?
So Jews just celebrated the holiday of Purim. I don't know if you know much about the holiday of Purim. The holiday of Purim is the book of Esther.
Mm-hmm.
The book of Esther is a very unique book in the Bible because God's name doesn't appear once in the
Yeah.
book of Esther. It's the only book in the Bible where God's name does not appear. What the heck is it doing in the Bible if God's name doesn't appear there? The holiday Esther, the book of Esther. The holiday is called Purim, which means lots. Purim means lots, like almost like throwing lots, gambling, like nothing makes sense.
Mm.
But Esther means hidden. Seter in Hebrew means to hide. The lesson of the holiday, the fundamental lesson of the holiday is you may not see the reason. You may not see why things are happening. God may not make himself completely visible at that moment, and he won't explain to you why things are going on. But God is always hiding in the background. God is always there. I don't have any problem at all with the notion that things happen in life for a reason. I think that's the definition of faith, the belief that there is some deeper purpose to everything that's going on in front of us. What bothers me is when people think they know why, and they tell you why it's happening. Now, that does not happen on Purim. If you read the book of Esther, it's a bunch of people just doing stuff, but in the end, it leads to redemption. It's not that God did anything. There are no crazy miracles in that book.
Yeah.
It's just people living their lives, making decisions, but in the end, redemption comes. And what you see is there's nothing random that happens in the scroll. We're working off topic here, but you know that actually there's a lot of similarities between the story of Joseph and the book of Esther. Again, I need another hour to talk about it. But remember, Mordecai becomes the elevated in the book, just like Joseph becomes elevated in the book,
Wow.
right?
I never
Um,
thought about those
they
connections,
are
but yeah, I'm
stories
starting
that
to
there's
see a
a
bunch of things
lot
line up.
of similarities between the Joseph story and the book of Esther, right? They both happen in other countries. They don't happen in Israel. Almost all stories in the Bible are happening in Israel and Canaan. They're both stories that happen in other places. There's a king, foreign ruler. We can get into it maybe on a different podcast. But the short answer to your question is yeah, everything is happening here for a reason. Joseph, by the way, this story too, there's no crazy miracles in the Joseph story. The sea
Yeah.
doesn't split here. All there is a guy who's really smart. For some reason, Joseph can interpret dreams, right? Even he says, God is helping me to interpret these dreams. That's the magic. That's the only miracle. That's the only magic in these stories. That Joseph is very wise. He can interpret dreams.
Wow.
But God's working behind the scenes. This is all happening for a reason, right? The ultimate uh, destiny of this story is we've got to save the covenant because this covenant right now is stuck in Canaan. The covenant people is stuck in Canaan, and there's a famine coming.
Yeah.
So we've got to put everyone in their place. So when that famine comes, the covenant holders, the 12 tribes of Israel, make their way down to Egypt. And by the way, for Jews, this is an important story because this foreshadows how did we all end up as slaves in Egypt?
Hmm.
But God tells Abraham, that's 2 generations earlier. Your descendants are going to go down to Egypt. Don't you worry about it. You're covenant holders. You're going to have trouble. We were just talking before the podcast about where I'm coming from, the burial of a Holocaust survivor. Look, Jews have had to grapple with this story of we're the chosen people. Why don't God choose somebody else? I think that's a line from Fiddler on the Roof, by the way. I think there's a line Fiddler on the Roof. Tevye says, "Why don't you choose somebody else? Why do we keep having to suffer like this?" But that is the role of covenant holders in history. We're there because there's a deeper purpose, a greater purpose that we have to fulfill, and that can't happen when everything is easy and peaceful and prosperous. And that's why in Jewish interpretation, Jacob is almost scolded by God when he says, "Listen, I just want to retire now. I want to move to, you guys are in Arizona, right? I want to move to Arizona. I want to retire. I'm done." And God scolds him and says, "You're not done. You're you're my covenant holder. You kidding? You wrestled with an angel. You think I'm going to let you go play golf for the rest of your days? There's a deeper purpose I have for you to fulfill. It's going to involve pain. It's going to involve suffering. But know always that I'm in control. Know always that there's a purpose." I'm sorry. I'm being very rabbinic. I'm getting all excited,
I
Jim.
love
But
it.
you asked me a really good question. And like I said, what gets me upset when people say why it's happening. No, 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 no. Only God knows why things happen. And you can do a lot of damage by telling people that this happened for that reason
Yeah.
or another reason, right? Only
Mhm.
God knows that. But
And
the
I'm,
idea
I'm
that our suffering has a holy purpose, don't give up on that. That's core. That's biblical, man. Okay, go ahead.
no, I love that because I think we so often try to interpret the reason, and sometimes in our faith, the reason, someone dies young, it's, well, God needed them on the other side. God, like, he had a work for them to do, and
You don't know.
we're making stuff up.
You don't
We're
know,
we're we're
right?
trying to comfort and be there
Yeah.
and put our arm around someone who's struggling and say, well, God needed this to happen, or you've got this trial because God needs you to learn X, Y, or Z, and it's like, who are we to come up with these ideas as to why this is happening? But to your point, there is something happening, and it's happening in the background. And in this story, it took, uh, like you said, I guess two whole generations. But in this story of Joseph going into Egypt and being sold there, and then however long it was, the 7 years of prosper. But before that, it took a decade or more for God's hand to be seen and for that to work its way through. Um,
Right.
and then 400 years in Egypt beyond that. But
That's
Well,
right.
well, and I
And it
wonder,
continues. And it
and,
continues,
and
by
we're
the way.
still in it.
That's right. For
I
Jews, this is
wonder,
God's providential hand is always there. Gentlemen, I don't want to get into politics right now, but there's a big war going on in the Middle East right now. Don't you think Jews see this as the providential hand of God? We are a dinky little country of 10 million people in the middle of a desert. And here we are partnering with the United States of America, the greatest army the world has ever known, literally working to save the world from World War III. This, us, our dinky Jews? We're nothing. We're 0.01% of the population. But don't you think even today we're looking at this going, wow, this thing is real. This is my Bible. This is, by the way, how Jews study the Bible. I got the Hebrew on one side, the English on the other, and my interpretations both in the Hebrew and the English underneath. That's how Jews read the Bible. Never in a translated language without the original Hebrew right there.
that's
Awesome.
cool.
Okay, sorry for the little political. I know we shouldn't get into politics there, but I'm trying to explain to you, right? I'm your rabbi. You haven't had a rabbi yet on the podcast. I'm telling you, we see God's providential hand everywhere. We have a holiday last week dedicated to it. Don't ever miss out on the idea that just because you can't see something, that it is not real. That is the gift of Jewish people to the world in a world that is obsessed with materialism and only the idols that you can see. This book screams and shouts not to worship what your eyes can see, not to follow after your eyes. God gave you a mind. God gave you perception. God gave you the power to understand that love is not something you can touch, but it is something you can feel, that it can be more real, it can change worlds. And that's who God is. God is a power. God is a force. God's inside each person, right? Even if you may not be able to touch it or to feel it. Okay, there's my sermon.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, please keep going with. I know we kind of I put you down a sidetrack, but yeah, keep going with why these chapters and the sons of Israel and all of that.
So this covenant, right? This is where I started. So this covenant moment is all leading up to this feud between Joseph and his brothers. Now, how old are you guys? Can I ask you? Is it fair to ask you how old you are? I'm trying to see
I
if you
turned
would know.
39 on Friday.
Okay, so you're around my age. And Jim?
I'm 37.
Okay, do you know Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat? Do you know the show? Come
I know
on.
of it, but I've never
Oh,
seen it.
man.
I've watched a high
I
school
don't get it.
production of it.
Do you know who starred as
I
Joseph and
do.
Joseph
I
and
do. Yep.
the most famous Mormon who ever lived, Donny Osmond, the greatest of the great? Please, everybody, if you're watching this podcast, go check out it. I think it's free on YouTube. Go watch one of the greatest musicals Andrew Lloyd Webber ever produced, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. He does a wonderful job at bringing this story to life and making it fun and just sucking you in to the emotion of this amazing story. It is not a story of miracles. That means it's not a story that is difficult to imagine. It plays out in relationships. There's an extraordinary story here about Joseph in Potiphar's household. One of the only stories the Bible tells about being a teenager. Bible doesn't really tell us a lot about being a teenager, how tough it is to be a teenager. Do you know the story I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You reviewed these chapters. So just to skip ahead, you know what happens. They throw Joseph in a pit, and the brothers throw Joseph into a pit. They originally are conspiring to kill him, but then they change their minds Let's send him down a caravan. Ends up in Potiphar's household in Egypt. And Potiphar sees in this boy so much promise. He's such a good worker. He's so wise, so clever. He succeeds in Potiphar's household. And yet his wife is a temptress. And you want to talk about the reality of being a teenager in the world we live in today. This story speaks profoundly to what it means to be in a world filled with temptation. Potiphar's wife is aggressive and she goes after them. She goes after him. According to tradition, Joseph is 17 years old when this happens. He's a very good-looking young man and she wants him. And one of the, again, I told you, this is not a story of miracles. But Joseph says to this older woman, his wife's boss, no. He says no. He runs away from her. She grabs his undergarments and he runs away from her. We think that the great miracles in the Bible are the splitting of the sea or Jesus walking on water. Do you know that in Jewish tradition, this is one of the greatest miracles of the Bible? The Talmud says it's even greater than when the sea split. When Joseph said, no, I will not. Remember, she commands him, sleep with me, lay with me. I mean, what is he stupid? Of course, sleep with her. It's your wife's boss. You got a good job. You have no alternative. Where are you going to go if you get thrown out of this household? You know you're going straight to jail. Just agree to do it. You're 17 years old. You're probably interested in this anyway.
You've been there.
Right. How could you have said no? He didn't have a Bible.
Yeah.
But something inside of him, some Holy Spirit spoke into his ear and said, this isn't right. This is a woman who is married. She's after you for the wrong reasons. Say no. And he runs away from her. And the sea splits. The Hebrew word for, I say the sea splits. I'm going to explain to you why. When Joseph runs away, the Hebrew word is vayanos. And Joseph fled, fleeing from her. In the book of Psalms, there's a special psalm dedicated to the splitting of the sea. I forget which number it is, but you can look it up. When the Israelites left Egypt, ... the same word vayanos appears. It says the sea fled. It's a strange word. The sea fled. But that word is used very purposefully. Just like the miracle of Joseph saying no to Potiphar's wife coming on to him. Having the power to resist. The same thing could be compared to the sea resisting its own urges. The sea flows in one direction. But when you say no to even your body that's flowing in one direction, when you change direction, the sea can change direction too. I hope that was clear. It's one of my favorite rabbinic interpretive stories on Joseph in Potiphar's household. But this is a great story. Every missionary that's out there has got to know this story because missionaries are studying carefully about life and its temptations. You're at a turning point in your life where you're making very important decisions. And you got to know that you're surrounded with versions of Potiphar's wife left and right. And where is the story in the Bible about how I navigate situations like that? It's Joseph, really the only teenager we get to meet in the Bible, where there's something substantive said about him. We know a little bit about David. But it's this story that really speaks to the moral challenges of temptation. And again, it ain't the kind of miracle that changes the laws of nature, but it's the kind of inner miracles that change the story, that show that you can make your own miracles in life if you follow what's right. Joseph chooses to do what's right, gets thrown in jail. And this young man, who his whole childhood was busy telling everybody else about his dream, suddenly finds himself with nobody to talk to, nobody to tell his dreams to. And then Pharaoh's servants end up in jail with him. And he does something amazing. He says, "How are you guys? Nice to meet you. I'm Joseph." Introduces himself. You know, all great meetings in life, you have to have the courage to say hi. Nice to meet you. It's an amazing scene in the Bible where Joseph looks at their faces and says, "Why are your face? You don't look happy today." Joseph doesn't know these people. Duh, you're in jail. Of course they're not happy today, but he wants to get to know them. This is what Bible scholars call a wisdom story. Joseph is a wisdom story. It's a guy who's really, really smart. He knows how to work with people, knows how to talk to them, knows how to avoid bad situations, and knows how to get himself in good situations.
I love the connection to parting of the Red Sea. I had never thought of that, and I don't think I ever would.
No,
I
you
don't
got to
know
know
that
the
I'll ever learn
Hebrew. You
Hebrew,
got
and
to
I
know the
feel,
Hebrew. Right,
yeah, you won't get that in any English translation.
right.
I love that connection. That inner decision is a miracle. And then also this idea of, we think, oh yeah, we know the story. He's chatting with them. I haven't been in prison myself, but I imagine you could build lots of different kind of relationships. And the fact that these guys are opening up to him, telling him their, inner thoughts does give you a lot of insight into what kind of a
Right,
guy he was.
right. Joseph's at the lowest point of his life. And this young man, who you might have thought at the beginning is a little bit arrogant.
Yeah.
Remember, he's going to his brothers saying, "Hey, I had this dream, or you guys are
They're
going
gonna
to
bow to
bow
me.
down to me."
Yep.
And even mom and dad, "I'm going to be great one day." He comes off as a little bit prideful. He's at the lowest point of his life in a jail cell, ready to get executed. And he suddenly changes. His whole demeanor changes. Sometimes in life, you got to be brought to the lowest point before you start to re-examine your life. And at that low point, he turns towards others. One of the great lessons of the Bible. You feeling crappy about your life? You're in a bad place? Stop looking in the mirror at how awful you are. This is something Elder Holland spoke about frequently. Stop feeling sorry for yourself and look at others and ask yourself, how can I help somebody else? That is what Joseph does in that moment. He looks at Pharaoh's cupbearer and the baker and says, "Hey, why are you so sad? How can I help you?" And instead of talking about his dreams, he starts listening to their dreams and he interprets their dreams. And nothing happens after one gets elevated and one is sent to their death for years. But then another great miracle happens in the Joseph story, a miracle that is not supernatural, but the cupbearer, who was the one who was restored back to his previous position. Am I right? It's the cupbearer or the baker? I always forget. I think it's the cupbearer who's
The
restored.
cupbearer, because the bread gets
Okay.
eaten by the birds.
Okay, he's done. So the cupbearer who gets restored to his position is listening to Pharaoh, who's having these weird dreams, and suddenly thinks to himself, "Hey, I know somebody. I met this kid in prison who was a really good dream interpreter. I know you don't look like, the average reader doesn't look at this as a miracle, but these are miracles."
Mhm.
The fact that years before this happened to him and he remembered somebody. Guys, I can tell you so many times in my life when I've been shocked that years after I met somebody, that person remembered me and I didn't remember them. But they remembered me and it helped me out in some way or connected somebody else to me. Everything in life is God putting people in front of our faces and us just taking it for granted, but then realizing sometimes later, like I said to you, Jim, there's a purpose for God's hand is behind every meeting, every encounter. You never know that somebody you might meet, have a short conversation with, might one day have something to that might help connect you towards a brighter future. It's
Yeah.
so important in life not only to have good friends. I know people say that's an important thing in life. You got to have great friends. But we de-emphasize the importance of having just friends. Not great friends, in other words, guys that you're spending every weekend with. It's really good to have friends and keep them close. Some guy you met on a flight that you but you stayed instead of letting the relationship just go dry, get to know them a little bit. It's what Joseph does. And they become really useful to him. How many people in their lives say, I met my wife because I met this guy who connected me to her somehow very randomly. I got this job because somebody else connected me randomly after he heard that it was something I was interested. I mean, so many people in life can point to moments where an acquaintance, somebody you didn't know too well, really helped connect the dots in your life and helped you achieve blessing. So I think that's a great, great, powerful lesson in the story. But I want to get to the sort of the end to the tribes of Israel because it's really important. Okay, let's jump through.
Yeah.
If you
Joseph,
want, we can skip. We'll assume that our readers did the reading, or at least
do
they've
the
been
reading.
hearing the stories
Joseph,
in church
go see
forever.
the right or go see the play
Yeah.
or watch the movie. Um, and you know what happens. Joseph is brought up from jail. He interprets Pharaoh's dream. Pharaoh elevates him to become viceroy of Egypt. And during the 7 years of famine, which Joseph predicted, the his brothers come and they don't recognize him, but he recognizes them. And another miracle. Joseph, in the end, I mean, I'm skipping ahead here, but
Mhm.
Joseph, instead of saying, "You tried to kill me, get the heck out of here," Joseph forgives them.
Yep.
Another miracle.
Absolutely.
He holds no anger. He sees everything happen. Jim, that goes back to your question. Joseph realizes it. No, I'm not going to be angry at you. Everything happened for a reason. If you wouldn't have threw me in that pit, I wouldn't be here sitting next to the most powerful ruler in the world as his second in command. So I'm not going to be angry at you because God has a purpose for everything, even our trials, even what in the moment I would have perceived to have been a terrible crime and offense done against me. Joseph forgives them, and his famous question is my father still living? Od Avinu Chai. We know those words in Hebrew. Is my father still living? As an aside, one of the most beautiful songs in Hebrew that we sing to proclaim Jewish endurance, that we're still here, is the song Od Avinu Chai. It's a very famous Jewish song. Is my father still alive? Sort of strange,
That's
because
cool.
one of the great miracles of Judaism is maybe the greatest of all, is that this people that we're reading about in this book is still around. Here, I have a lot of respect for Latter-day Saints, but Joseph Smith is the beginning of the 1800s.
Yep.
It's about 200 years old. This story happens thousands of years ago, 3,500 years ago or so.
Maybe we can petition the Tabernacle Choir to sing that song in an upcoming Music in the Spoken Word.
I'm sure if they sang it, it would be the best rendition of Od Avinu Chai we've ever heard.
Or we can get it in our
But
hymn book. We're trying to get a bunch of new hymns.
but
And so,
it's a funny thing you asked that question, Justin, because these are your grandparents too.
Mhm.
Never forget, Latter-day Saints are a covenant people. You may have a little bit of a different interpretation of covenant than we do. But I think sometimes the emphasis on the church, and I know this is not an episode about rabbis commenting on Latter-day Saint theology, but where the church now is global. So sometimes there's a less of an emphasis on the roots and the history and the theology and the covenant, because covenant is unique. It makes you peculiar, to use the words, I think, from the Book of Mormon. Book of Mormon use that word, peculiar? I think so.
Yeah.
Jews love peculiar. We love being peculiar. God doesn't promise that that we're going to be the greatest people in the world by quantity. It says it very clearly in the Bible. But you will be treasured. You'll be special. You'll have a unique role. You'll be strange. But there are gifts that you will bring to the world. You will be a light unto the nations. And so we cherish the fact that we ask this question. Od Avinu Chai, is our Father still alive? It's almost like we're asking, is this real? Is this a dream? That I can read stories about my ancestors from 3,500 years ago? And of course, the story, one of the great culminations of the story, is Jacob goes to his son and they embrace. And a sight that he never thought he would see, the experience of reunion with his favorite son, happens. Now, let's get to the meat of the matter. The 12 tribes of Israel. Here they are, gathered as Jacob is dying at the end of the book of Genesis. By this point, Joseph has 2 children. The 2 children are born in Egypt. Their names, I'm not even going to say them. I want you to say their names.
Ephraim and Manasseh.
Very good. If you didn't know that, I was going to log off this call right now and end this podcast. Ephraim and Manasseh. These are Jacob's grandchildren, right? And Jacob says, bring them to me. He brings Ephraim and Manasseh to him and says, you're going to be like children to me. He has a special relationship with these 2 boys. And it's not clear why, but Jews in that moment of Ephraim and Manasseh's blessing see a moment of eternal significance. Something strange happens in the story. Instead of blessing them like this, he blesses them like this, with crossed hands. The right hand is supposed to go to the elder child. The elder child is Manasseh. But, or am I wrong? Hold on. I'm trying to forget. I'm always getting this stuff confused. I can look it up in the Bible, but he crosses his hands and blesses the younger before the older. Now, after reading from the beginning of Genesis, what happens when brothers don't get what they think they're owed? What do you think was going to happen? Well, we're going to have another fight, right? By the way,
I feel
I'll
like
read from you
this has
directly. I
happened
opened
several
up the scene.
times
Of
where
course.
the birthright goes to the younger brother.
I'm reading chapter 48, verse 13. Joseph took the 2 of them, Ephraim with his right hand to Israel's left, with Manasseh with his left hand to Israel's right. Israel, by the way, is the name that Jacob is given. And he drew close to them. But Israel extended his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger. So I had it right the first time. Ephraim was the younger child. And his left hand on Manasseh's head. He maneuvered his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. He blessed Joseph, and he said, by the way, the Bible says he blessed Joseph. Look at that. He wasn't blessing Joseph. He was blessing Ephraim and Manasseh. How do you bless somebody in life? Here's another very important lesson in the Bible. I mean, I could spend this whole podcast just talking on 1 verse or 2 verses. Jews, you know, are a little bit obsessed with Scripture.
That's why we want you on.
How do you bless somebody in life? You be a blessing to their children. If you're a decent father, you know that a gift bestowed to your children is more than any gift bestowed upon you. Israel blesses Ephraim by blessing, Israel blesses Joseph by blessing Ephraim and Manasseh, his two sons. Switches his hands over and gives this tremendous blessing to them. O God, before whom my forefathers Abraham and Isaac walked, God who shepherds me from inception until this day. Jim, do you hear those words? God who shepherds me. That's why. Don't tell me there's randomness in life. This is our patriarch saying, God, you shepherded me. I didn't know where I was going, but you guided me. You were there. You were telling me where to go. May the angel who redeems me from all evil bless these lads, and may my name be declared upon them, and the names of my forefathers, Abraham and Isaac, and may they proliferate abundantly like fish within the land. It's a beautiful blessing that he gives. We actually have, there's a song, a Hebrew song that we sing at weddings to this tune. And I'll tell you something else. Every Friday night, the father of the household blesses his children in a Jewish home. And the blessing is, may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. It's all because of this scene. All because of this scene. This moment is so powerful. Blessing his grandchildren with the greatest of blessings, that we want this bestowed upon our own children. Joseph saw that his father was placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, and it displeased him. So he supported his father's head to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Dad, you got it wrong. He's the firstborn, and he's the secondborn. And Joseph said to his father, not so, father, for this is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. But his father refused, saying, I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will become great, yet his younger brother shall become greater than he, and his offspring's name will fill the nations. So he blessed them and said, by you shall Israel bless your children. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. And guess what? The chapter ends. They don't kill each other. They don't throw each other into a pit. They don't get into a fist fight. One of the most important things that happens in this chapter is this story of fratricide and jealousy, which is there right from Cain and Abel at the beginning of the Bible. At the end of Genesis, comes to its redemptive conclusion. It is possible for brothers to get along.
So another miracle.
Think of the miracle there. This is why I love the Bible. Think of the deep lesson there. Why do we have a Bible? The Bible opened up with a tremendous question. Cain kills Abel, and Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? When God says, what did you do? And the question is answered at the end of the book. You bet your ass you are your brother's keeper. You bet you are.
Yeah.
We are a world that will be destroyed if we do not consider ourselves to be brothers, if we cannot get along with each other, if we're filled with jealousy and rage when the hand gets put on this brother instead of yours when you thought you deserved it. If that's the world we're living in, we're going to go back to pre-flood times, and there'll be no more world left. The world will endure when we learn to accept that some people will get more blessed and some people will be less blessed, and we will love them nonetheless.
And
this is a tremendous conclusion. Then the tribes of Israel each received their blessing from Jacob. Stop me at any time. I know I'm just talking, but you
I
hired a
just
rabbi.
wanted to
Go ahead.
include this brief thing. This is in our Come Follow Me reading from a couple of weeks ago, and I absolutely love this quote as it's talking about covenants. And it says, did this covenant the Abrahamic covenant. Did this covenant give Abraham, Sarah, and their descendants a privileged status among God's children? Only in the sense that it is a privilege to bless others. Being God's
Amazing.
covenant people didn't mean they were better than others. It meant they had a duty to help others be better.
Amazing.
I love that. And
Beautiful.
that's exactly what you're saying.
That's right. And it takes till the 50th chapter or 48, 49 till we finally get there, right? That's how we read the book of Genesis. It's an arc that begins with jealousy and hatred and cruelty, leading to disasters and flood and fratricide and terrible pain within families. And it ends up with a loving relationship between two brothers, which is why we bless our children to this day. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh, the two brothers who are the first example we have in the Bible,
My
who
kids
had
need that
who had an
blessing.
opportunity to get at each other and be jealous of each other and start wars with each other, like Esau started a war with Jacob, but who said, "We're it's good, it's cool. I got my blessing, you got your blessing. Yours might be bigger than mine, but that's okay. I love you nonetheless." That's Ephraim and Manasseh.
So I'd
Now,
love to
how much more
kind
time do
of
we have? Because I got to get to the end.
yeah, no, I mean we are at time, but that's fine. I'd love to get to them, but I'd like to kind of, and maybe this is where you're getting at, but you mentioned like patriarchal blessings, and most of us, most
Right,
American-born members of the church, when we are given a tribe and our lineage is declared, we are members of Ephraim,
right.
the tribe of Ephraim. Can you tell us what that means?
Very good. So, in this last chapter, now, the last chapter of Genesis, the tribes line up. When I say tribes, it's the children
Mm-hmm.
of Jacob. They get their blessing. Now, the truth is, they're not blessings. Sometimes they're curses. They're not getting their blessing. They're getting, what Jacob really thinks of them. He doesn't have nice things to say to everybody. But of the 12, two blessings really stand out. The first is the blessing given to Judah. Judah gets the blessing of the scepter. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, the Bible says. This is the crown of kingship. And this is actually what happens in Jewish history. The great kings of Israel come from Judah. King David
David. Yeah.
is from Judah. Jews trace their ancestry to Judah, and I'll explain why in a moment. But of course, for Christians, this is a very, very important blessing because the Messiah comes from Judah. So Jesus as well is from the tribe of Judah. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. So the messianic tribe comes from him. It's interesting why. It's because Judah, right, in the end steps up, and it steps up for Benjamin. Remember in the story, Judah
Mm-hmm.
says, "No,
Yeah.
take me, don't take him." So it's an act of sacrifice. Judah is rewarded here. And later in Jewish history, Judah is one of the tribes that grows very large and survives. Judah's tribe is located in the south. Jerusalem is part of Judah, and Benjamin, they're in the southern tribes. Judah becomes one of the great kingdoms of Israel. And the other special blessing goes to Ephraim. Ephraim gets a tremendous blessing, a different crown, and he's given a special blessing, the double portion, because instead of blessing Joseph, he gives the double portion blessing to Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's children. That's the double portion. Now, in the Bible, the double portion has great significance because the double portion goes to the firstborn child. The problem is that Joseph is not the firstborn. Reuben is the firstborn. But Jacob's not happy with Reuben. We can get into that. You can read it yourself why Jacob's not happy with Reuben. And he says, "I'm taking the firstborn away from you, and I'm giving it to Joseph. Joseph, you get it through Ephraim and Manasseh." and later on in Jewish history, the other great tribe becomes Ephraim. There in the north, the northern tribes coalesce around this Ephraimite tribal identity. And later, after King David and King Solomon, they get their own kings, and Judah gets its own kings in the south. What happens in the 7th century is the prophets, Isaiah, Hosea, they start warning that the Assyrians are going to come and they're going to destroy the northern kingdom. That means Ephraim. The Ephraim kingdom is destroyed. That's what happens in the 7th century. The Assyrians knock them out. And for Jews, we call this the lost tribes of Israel, the 10 lost tribes of Israel. For us, they're actually lost. We don't know where they are because they were taken into Assyrian captivity. Judah saved itself because we just agreed to get into an alliance with the Assyrians. By the way, if you go to Jerusalem today, you can still see the walls that the tribe of Judah built to protect themselves from the Assyrian onslaught. They're still there.
Cool.
So Judah saved itself, but Ephraim did not. Now, this is a huge theological problem. Why is it a theological problem? Because if the blessing of covenant, the firstborn, went to Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh, his two children, how can it be that they're gone? How can it be that they just disappeared? Never heard from again. The Jews have a very big challenge, or I would say a theological problem with that idea that Ephraim is gone. In the end, the Talmud says when the Messiah comes back, there will be a Messiah who is from the tribe of Joseph. That's the only resolution we have, is when the Messiah comes, he'll have to be, at least some messianic figure will have to come from Joseph. But Latter-day Saints have a better answer. If Ephraim and Manasseh are the treasured tribe, Jacob gives them the blessing, they have to endure. Where are they enduring? Where are they? Where are these lost tribes? Well, Lehi is from the tribe of
Manasseh.
and his children marry the daughters of Ishmael, and Ishmael is from
See Ephraim?
Ephraim.
Okay.
Latter-day Saints have this incredible story with these 12 tribes. That the covenant, which was passed to the descendants of Joseph through Ephraim and Manasseh, that it endures. It endures through Lehi. It endures through his descendants. I believe one of Lehi's children's name is Joseph. Am I right?
Correct.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yep.
And that in the second book of Nephi, he's referenced
Mm-hmm.
as Joseph from Egypt, through the second Joseph, which is Joseph the son of Lehi. Then the covenant passing on to the third Joseph, who's Joseph Smith Sr. And by the way, all patriarchal blessings in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints originate with Joseph Smith Sr. The first patriarchal blessing is the one Joseph Smith Jr. receives from his impoverished father at the end of his life. Joseph wants to honor him and asks him to give him a blessing. Following down to the fourth Joseph, Joseph Smith Jr. So if Latter-day Saints don't appreciate or understand the importance of this story in their covenantal identity, I would say it's time to open up your Bibles and study it carefully, because you are descendants of Joseph, the viceroy of Egypt, holders of covenant and that special blessing which is passed on to Ephraim and Manasseh, destined to be a peculiar people, and ultimately to help bring forth the gathering of all the tribes of Israel. By the way, Yosef means to gather. Joseph means to gather. That's your role.
Wow.
To gather the 12 tribes of Israel, and ultimately to herald the messianic redemption of the world. So
That is incredible.
read your Bibles, read
Thank you.
these chapters. There's a lot of interesting stuff, but this piece of scripture, if you are a Latter-day Saint, is gold.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Grover. I'm stuck in a rut here. Thank you, Rabbi Grover, for being with us on this podcast. I've learned so much, and I hope I get to learn from you again in not too distant future. Um, for our listeners, next week we're getting into Exodus 1 through 6, so read that. Do you have any final words for us, Rabbi Grover, before we sign off?
Till we meet, God be with you. Till we meet again.
Appreciate it. I hope we do meet again. We will continue this. Like you said, we these small acquaintances that come up, we need to build on those and continue that friendship. So absolutely, we'll do that.
Yeah, God be with you too. Thank you so much.